Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Mom Mentality Podcast, the podcast that's made for moms of busy babies. I am so excited to welcome Dr. Gwenyth Jackaway with us this afternoon. Welcome to the podcast, and thanks for having us.
Thank you, Sasha. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the introduction.
Yes. Would you mind just introducing yourself? Tell us a little bit about you professionally, personally.
Okay. So I guess I'll start with what's perhaps most relevant to your listeners, which is that I am a mom. I have a 20-year-old son, almost 21. So I, of course, remember the baby days. And even though it was almost 2 decades ago, it feels like yesterday. I'm also an educator. For many years, I was a college professor with an area of specialty in communication technologies and the impact of new media on society. And so I spent many years teaching college classes about the role of the media in our lives. And I'm also a longtime meditator, and I'll explain in a moment how those things have come together. I left the college classroom a few years ago to try to make a bigger difference because, in the college classroom, you're only talking to 20-year-olds. I wanted to touch more people's lives and not be so abstract and theoretical and offer things that could make a difference since the media plays such a central role in our lives now. And so in recent years, I brought together my interest in mindfulness and meditation with my interest in the impact of new media. And I'm now trained as a digital wellness educator and a mindfulness instructor. And so I offer workshops to schools and parents and families about digital wellness, how we can live in a more healthy and balanced way with our technologies. And I also am an educational consultant for Carrots and Cake, a company that produces a wonderful parental control app for parents to put on their iPads and phones to help their children make some balanced choices about media use. And I can tell you more about that later.
For sure. Oh gosh, this is going to be a great topic and area for discussion. So first of all, I would just love for you to be able to share how mindfulness has played such a role in your own personal life as a mom and then as a working professional, trying to balance those two things together. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
I'm happy to. So I started meditating when I was in my 20s, going through the various kinds of personal challenges that people in their 20s often do. Growing up, it's not always so easy. And so I found my way to meditation and mindfulness in particular, which is a particular style of meditation, which is really about just being present in the moment. Okay. Without judgment and without resistance, and being open to the actual experience that we're having and staying right here, be here now. And it made a tremendous difference in my life. And I've been a student of mindfulness ever since. And even now, after many decades of practice, I continue to find it goes deeper and deeper the more I learn. So, and this is a practice that's thousands of years old. And of course, many spiritual traditions have meditation as a piece of the overall set of spiritual practices. And there's a reason for that, right? The answer lies within, as Cat Stevens put it.
That's right.
So I'm very, very grateful that I've had this as an aspect of my life. I came to motherhood late. So I was, busy living a single life when I was younger, and mindfulness helped me navigate that whole journey. And then once I became a mom and I was a working professor, that's a lot to balance. And I'm a single mom, so a lot of responsibility. And, this having a practice of checking in with yourself every day, even if it's only 5 minutes. People might say, oh, I don't have time. You've got 5 minutes. You could shave 5 minutes off your social media use. We all have 5 minutes. And if you just create a space for yourself every day, just check in. How am I doing? Make some breaths, ground in your body. Can make a huge difference. We get all caught up in our minds with all kinds of stories. And in the end, the only thing that's actually happening is this moment, right? Not the past and not the present and not the future.
Yes.
Not the, and you know, a lot of people are walking around in the past and in the future, and we miss this moment altogether. And maybe you haven't gotten to that point yet, but there comes a point where the birthdays just start racking up, and it's another decade, and it's another decade. And you're like, when do you actually get there, right? But actually, we're always there, which is always now, and it's always just now.
What was the hardest part when you first started that?
Learning how to sit still. I was so I'm a New Yorker. I'm coming to you live from Manhattan, and you know, I'm sitting here with my cup of caffeine, which is never far away. And you know, I was a go 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 kind of girl. Some of that was youth, but some of it was just my natural energy. I'm a high energy kind of being, and I was very much so when I was young. Always, you know, either just lots going on.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
learning how to sit still was hard. I was a runner, I was an athlete. At that time, I found yoga too slow. Yoga, it's too slow. I want to run, I want to jump. And I think that different kinds of practices suit people at different life stages. So for some of your listeners, if it's hard to sit still, the slower martial arts like Tai Chi and Qigong can be a way to, give your body something to do while you're trying to be present.
Love that.
But for me, at first, it was learning how to sit still. Just be, just breathe. And it's hard. That's why they call it a practice. You have to keep practicing.
Yes. And what motivated you to keep practicing even when you face those initial challenges of, because I know even for me, it's like something that as a licensed therapist and it's like working with clients and trying to teach clients mindfulness and even myself practicing, you said it is very much a practice. I continually have to work on mindfulness and bringing myself to the present moment and even just acknowledging this is how I feel, this is where I'm at right now, instead of going back and thinking about all my mistakes or how I could have done things better, and then also forecasting the future and just be like, okay, let's just be here right now. And I think even for myself personally, now that I've had kids, I have to practice it more than ever because time just seems to go by so fast and our lives, my life is completely chaotic all the time.
Right.
And so being able to sit still and be in the present moment, that is extremely hard. So what motivated you to keep going, to continue to practice despite the challenges and the difficulty?
Well, this may sound like a funny answer, but I now see it this way. I was gifted, air quotes, for those of you who are listening on
Yes.
on podcast. I was gifted with a strange chronic pain condition in my 20s, which I have now come to understand. I mean, I was living in an out of balance way in a bunch of ways, but in terms of my own personal journey as a spirit, you know, as a being, I needed a wake up call that the way I was living wasn't working. And so I was having some chronic pain, which has been a part of my life ever since in various parts of me. I generate pain. Fortunately, I have not yet generated anything more serious, but physical pain is a ongoing part of my life. And I had a very helpful doctor once say to me, I don't think that we can help, that traditional medicine can help. This was decades ago. When it was still a little unusual for a doctor to say something like that, right? They don't
Yes.
always admit that they can't help. And he said, you might want to try meditation. And, you know, it didn't help overnight, but the first thing it taught me was that I could have a different relationship with the pain. And that's really a whole other podcast.
Yeah. I
But
would love to get into that.
I was motivated by my own distress and by the ways in which parts of my life were not working. And I had always been a very disciplined person in terms of my academics. I was very athletic. I know you're very involved with fitness. I'm less so now that I'm older, but I had the motivation skills already. I knew what it takes. You know, like, I'm sure you could speak to this.
Yes.
You want to lose weight, you want to get in shape. You know, there's days you don't want to go to the gym. It's too bad. You know, like if you're trying to reach that goal, you do it. So I had the discipline skills, and it was a question of transferring them to meditation. And once I started to see some results, that of course helped, as it does when you're dieting or exercising. And then what I would find is if I would skip a day, this was back when I didn't have a child, you know, I would notice the day would be off. It would be like not brushing your teeth, you know, it's like that in your mouth.
Yes.
And so I started, and I can't claim that my meditation practice has always looked the same or it's always happened in the same way, but I always return to it. Sometimes, you know, just like with dieting, sometimes you cheat or you make different kind of choices, and then you have to find your way back. And that's part of the practice too.
I love what you said is like this inner skill set. And you even had said before that you're like, everything exists within you. And I believe that so much. It's like we just have so much potential that's lying within us that we have to be able to tap into. And so you even knowing it's like, okay, I have this skill set, I have this discipline, and I just need to be able to apply it to another area of my life and then stay consistent and do it beyond the days that I don't feel like it. Because there are going to be plenty of days you don't feel like it. There's plenty of days we don't feel like parenting, but we have to do it anyway. I mean, we'll be honest here. I think that's what it is. And
absolutely.
You had shared with me before that your son is actually on the spectrum. And so when you became a mom and just being able to know, and I know so many other women that face the challenges that come along with that. I mean, it can be rough, and it definitely tests our patience in so many different areas. How did mindfulness help you cope? How did it help you deal with and have that relationship, a better relationship, I'm sure, with your son?
Right. So I know you shared with me that your son is 3, so he had an early diagnosis. And so the same with my son, he was diagnosed at 2. So of course, you know, as I'm sure you recall, that can be very painful, and it's very shocking, and it's scary. And, you know, generally, unless people have already have family members on the spectrum or close friends, it's this unknown, it's a word that sounds scary. And so I went through a challenging time, you know, in adapting to it. But even then, it's like, okay, be here now. This is what's happening right now. I want to resist it. I want to push it away. I want to fix it. I want to change it. But actually, at this moment, this is the reality. And, you know, it's certainly, my mindfulness helped both before and after his diagnosis with just being with him, like nursing him, holding him, you know, all of the chaos of babyhood, you know, just come back to center. When you feel yourself, you know, when I would feel myself feeling overwhelmed, take a breath. You know, it's always, there's a place in us that's always available, and it's one breath away. And it's hard, you know, for people who've not experienced the mindful place, they may not know, like, well, where is it? How do I get there? And that's why it's about practice. And once you sort of find it, that place of peace, a place of calm, then in the midst of chaos, you can just, okay, deep breath, let me come back to center. So, and then as my son got older, and as I'm sure you're aware, you know, kids on the spectrum, especially depending on how much language they have, which at 3, even a neurotypical child is not always that verbal yet, they have trouble communicating. So they yell and scream and hit things, or hit you, or bang themselves against the wall, or, you know, throw, like,
Yes,
You
All of
both
it.
can tell stories, right?
Yes,
So
all of
then
it.
they're having a temper tantrum, and what's very tempting, because we're animals with a nervous system and an amygdala and a brain that reacts to outside stimulus, it can be easy to start escalating with them. So they're yelling, and then the parent starts to yell, or the parent starts to cry, or the parent loses emotional self-regulation. And if you lose your emotional self-regulation, the child feels that, and then you bounce off each other.
Yes.
So one, and I know that in your space of parent education, there's a variety of theories about parenting, and so there's a whole school of thought of hitting children, and it's certainly I come from the place that it's not a good idea, and it's certainly not a good idea with kids on the spectrum, because you're not going to hit the autism out of them.
Yeah.
Right? The brain is wired
Exactly.
differently, and it's not their fault, and they're not doing something to annoy you, especially when they're little. They don't have that self-awareness or self-control. So what I used to do is put myself in timeout if my son was really upsetting me.
Yeah.
And that's like more when he was 5 or 6 and not able to fall off a chair and hurt himself, but by the time he was that level of childhood, like kindergarten through 3rd or 4th grade or whatever, I would say, okay, I'm gonna go sit in the other room and take a few breaths, and you play with this thing. Or
Yes.
so that's one answer to, that's a whole conversation. We could spend the whole hour on that.
I love that. Even you says like, I put myself in a timeout. And I think that is so important, because as moms, we feel guilty if we need a timeout, and we feel bad about ourselves that it's like, my kid's a lot and I need some time away from them. And it's like, oh, we're not supposed to feel that way as moms. But it shaking her head no over here. I'm like, no, like it's okay to put yourself in a timeout. And even with your meditation practice and being able to just have 5 minutes, if that's all you have to give, it's like 5 minutes counts.
Yep.
I love that. That's great. I think this is even a great segue into so the parent timeout. I've taken timeouts for myself,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm Zaman is nonverbal, like, so we deal with all the chaos, and we have these meltdowns and these moments, and so even in public, and people don't understand. And as I said, it's a very special and different dynamic. But at home, and this ties into your area of expertise. So at home, if I need a mommy timeout, I will give him his tablet. Or I'm a
Right.
mom that actually works from home remotely. And so this is why even
Mm-hmm.
your area of expertise drew me in so much, because a lot of times that tablet, when he's home with me, I mean, acts as this little babysitter, device babysitter for a moment. So it's like, what's your thoughts on, what's a good limit? How much screen time should our kids get? That is, and then when is it impacting them in a negative way? So I have so many questions, but I just want you to be able to share.
Great, thank you. So I hear you, and yes, these technologies can serve a very valuable and useful function for parents who need a little break. There are many benefits to the technologies for the young people, and like anything, moderation is a really great first word to add into this conversation. So it's not a question of a specific number.
Okay.
It would be like saying, how many hours a day should you read? If you read all day, that's actually a life out of balance. You might learn a whole bunch of things, but you're not interacting with other people. It's by definition a solitary activity, and it's not even
Yeah.
interactive, which the digital technologies are. You're not getting exercise. You could read outside, but you're certainly not running around and enjoying the outside world. So, and as you know, too much exercise is not a good idea either, right? People who get sort of addicted to exercise and the endorphins of exercise, that, can start crowding out the rest of your life. So I don't feel comfortable giving specific numbers because it also depends a lot on the content.
Okay.
So not all digital content is created equal. But people say things like how many screen time hours, as if what matters is the time spent, not the content consumed or engaged in.
More quality.
Yeah, quality. So, and it varies by age. As children's cognitive abilities develop and they develop new kinds of skills, various new kinds of content opens up to them. And, what makes sense for a 3-year-old wouldn't make sense for a 10-year-old. So,
right.
And then every 3-year-old is different and every 10-year-old is different. So people who try to give a fixed number, I understand that some parents want just keep it simple, give me a number, but it's not really realistic.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned, I'm part of the team at Carrots and Cake. It's a company that produces a parental control app that parents can download and put on their iPad or their phone. And it does a few wonderful things. So for a parent like yourself who works at home, or any parent who just needs a little break, or you're, as you say, in public and you want to keep your child calm, and it doesn't have to be a child on the spectrum. Neurotypical children have tantrums in public too. So
if you look around nowadays, every kid at a table is on a tablet or a phone.
Well, and that helps in restaurants, right? And it helps in airplanes, and it helps on, public transport, or if you're going for a long car ride. There's places where, situations where that can be very useful. But if you just, when parents simply, again, air quotes, hand the pad to the child without any restrictions on it, it's basically like letting your child loose in Times Square. Especially
does not sound safe.
Ponder that, right? And Times Square is safer than it used to be because I'm a longtime New Yorker, but there's lots of adult things in Times Square, and there's levels of stimulus that might be hard for certain kids' nervous systems. Plus, they may not always be engaging in content that helps them grow and develop in healthy ways. So the reason for the name of Carrots and Cake is that age-old parental advice: finish your vegetables before you have dessert. So carrots, I do too. The carrots and the Carrots and Cake is meant to refer to educational apps that you can download onto your phone. And we have lists of apps that suggest to people just, recommendations for various age groups. So the parent downloads the educational apps. There are some out there that are free, and there are some out there that, involve a small, but things like, PBS Kids or Duolingo, that are wonderful learning apps. And then you set a timer and you set it up ahead of time, and the setup's pretty easy. You say, all right, my child needs to have, let's say, 10 minutes of Sesame Street and 10 minutes of Duolingo Spanish, or whatever language you want them to learn about. Or whatever learning app. And then after that, it unlocks the cake portion. And for older children, the children can be part of deciding what the cake is. So you give them some agency, and that helps a lot. Something they really like. So you say, okay, you can go on, YouTube for kids, or Roblox, or whatever it is you like. And then they get a fixed amount of time. And then it's done. You can't, then it gives them a countdown. You have 5 more minutes, 4 more minutes, etc. And then it just stops. And then, when they're little, you can kind of play dumb and say, oh, well, that's it. The pad needs to go to sleep, or whatever.
Yeah.
But, and as they get older, you can start to explain, this is like dessert, and we don't eat dessert all day, and it's a wonderful thing. But, we need to do other things with our day. And you start to teach them that just like a TV show comes to an end and a book comes to an end, your time on the tablet ends. And the thing about the thing about digital media that we've gotten used to is it's always on. It's always there. It's the bottomless bowl, the endless scroll. You know, it's not like you can ever get to the end of Instagram. You ever think about that?
There's no end.
There's no end. Our news feeds, there's always more, right? And now we get into the economics of all that, which is that these platforms are designed to keep you on as long as possible, to promote engagement, as they say. Why? So that they can gather more data on our consumer behavior and our interests, so that you can see ads that seem magically to be exactly what you're interested in. And of course,
somehow
it's not at all an accident. And so they want you to stay on as long as possible, so they can be tracking everything you're doing and then feed you to the advertiser. And this is another reason that parents, it's important for parents to be very mindful about turning on all the privacy settings when their children are scrolling, because the device is picking up whatever's activity is on there. And eventually, you know, it's not going to happen with your 3-year-old, but eventually kids learn to type their name, and they see navigate to some window that asks them for their name and address. And, you know, that may not be something that you want them to do.
Scary.
So carrots and cake also serves as a kind of, it helps take over the role of technology superego or technology security guard. So you don't have to always be drawn into power struggles. Parents are often in power struggles with their kids to try to curtail or limit, and partly because of the stage of cognitive development that children are in, it's very difficult for them to deal with those kind of limits being put on them, because it's the prefrontal cortex, which you probably know about, is the part of the brain that controls self-regulation and logic and limits and self-control. And that's not done growing till they're 25. So if we all look back on our youth, we might see examples of that, right? So
we thought we were grown way before we actually were.
Exactly. So to say to an 8-year-old, well, just put the pad down, it's not that simple. It's not just you versus them. It's you versus Silicon Valley and Madison Avenue and Wall Street. And those are powerful forces. And they're also up against the neuroscience of the brain, which I can tell you more about.
Oh my gosh. Really like what you said, that we have to be, it acts as this little regulator, like I said, for us, and that they can't completely understand, because we want to say, oh, stop doing that.
Right.
And it's just not that simple.
Especially since we give them the technology. So that's a very complicated dynamic. Like, here, this is a pad, now I'm taking it away. Like, what? Or here's a present, stop using it. That's very, that's a conflicting set of signals, especially for a small child. And then there comes the other important issue, which is when kids look at their parents, you know what they often see? Parents looking down at their phones, yes, or their tablets or their computers. So if parents are saying, put your phone down, and kids are seeing adults everywhere with their face in their phone, what are they supposed to think about that? Right?
What do they think about that? I mean, well, I'm guilty of it. Right.
So, well, it's hard to ask, an 8-month-old or your 3-year-old, and we're only starting to gather data on this, right? Because these technologies are less than 20 years old, which is kind of remarkable how quickly they, between the smartphone and social media, none of this was around 20 years ago. And now these technologies have blanketed the planet, and people spend surprising numbers of hours per day engaging with these, right? So one thing that we know already about the brain development for small children is that they need eye contact, and they need the turn taking of linguistic acquisition. So fancy word for learning speaking, right?
Yes.
So I'll just talk for a moment about a neurotypical child. I know that it's different with nonverbal kids on the spectrum, but for a neurotypical child, the brain is wired for language, and they're going to learn whatever language they're hearing in their environment, which is such an incredible thing about the human brain.
It is.
Right. But they need to be spoken to, and they need to have the experience of the back and forth turn taking of conversation. So I speak, and I stop, and you speak, and we're looking at each other. And if in the middle of this podcast, I just like turned away and I'm kind of talking to you, but I'm not looking at you, that's confusing. Right. And one of the things that we are starting to see with teenagers is they're uncomfortable with face-to-face conversations because their social lives are completely asynchronous, or maybe it's synchronous, but it's not face-to-face.
Right.
Well, life involves needing to talk to other people, right? So, and if you go out in public, I don't know what it's like where you are. And I know for a lot of areas of the country, people live in their car, spend a lot of time in cars. But in New York City, where our lives are not about driving, you see people walking on the sidewalk, looking down, people crossing the street, looking at their phones, people on the subway, which may be more understandable, looking at their phones. I've seen people riding bicycles with headphones, looking at their phones.
I don't know how they do it.
Everybody is kind of withdrawing into this other dimension, cyberspace. So one way that, one thing we should be concerned about kids and screens is the impact on their social skills. And teens, especially tweens, because by the time they're older, they're not so interested in talking to their parents. Hate to tell you, that's coming. But when they're between about 5 and 11, they want contact. They want connection. So you should enjoy those years when they come. And kids talk about feeling ignored by their parents. So then, of course, if they have access to a device, then they'll retreat there too. So one thing that I recommend to families is about integrating digital wellness practices into the home, which I can talk about.
Yes, I'd love that. Yeah, for sure. I think this is something that we all need more of, because
Yep.
even me, like I work with all adults and primarily women. And I tell them all the time, like, even as we're working on sleep more, take care of yourself. And it's like, where's your time getting lost in the evenings? And a lot of times it's being sucked in technology. I'm like, you need to put the phone away.
Yeah. So, for adults, definitely take a look at your weekly screen report. If you have an iPhone, you can set it up to get your weekly screen report. I always kind of cringe when Sunday comes and I get my little number, and then I watch myself like coming up with justifications like, well, I was listening to podcasts and I was working. A lot of people are spending 6, 7, 8 more hours a day looking at these devices. Now, of course, some of it is work and some of it is, is social interactions, but that's a lot of hours. And if you think about feeling like you're running out of time to get to the other things that matter in your life, it comes back to balance. Like there's only 24 hours in a day. So you need some sleep, like 7 or 8 hours.
Yes.
Maybe you can get by on 6, but most adults can't get by on more than that. I mean, on less than that. If you're working outside the home, you have your job, you have your family, you have your kids. Where are there 8 hours to spend on the phone?
I have no idea.
Right. So some recommendations in terms of helping the children. Being a good model is so important. So if you're going to talk to your kids about their screen time, then you need to be able to also say, and I think it's fine to be honest with them and say, these things are a lot of fun and a lot of people like to spend a lot of time looking at them, but we have some other things that matter too. We don't need to demonize the technology. It's here and it's not going away. And you know what? More is coming. Who knows? Think about how the iPhone has changed in the last 10 years. Who knows what's coming? Who knows what's coming next? But we know that more is coming. So learning how to have a healthy, balanced relationship with these technologies is key. So start out with, there's certain places or times or situations where the phones are not welcome. And like when you say it like in our family, because that's important, because they may go to someone else's house, or there's two parents in different homes, or at grandma's house or something, you say, in our house, the rule is no devices at the table at the mealtime. It's so important to reserve some space for actual interaction, not mediated interaction where you're only half present.
Yes.
Now, here's a hard one. No phones in the bedroom. I think it's harder for adults than it is for little ones. With little ones, you can simply make sure that it's not there in the bedroom. As they get older, that may take some negotiation. But if you start with them young, they just learn that's how it is. Like, we used to smoke in public everywhere, on airplanes and in restaurants. And I don't know what it's like in Oklahoma, but all that is banned in New York now. People can get used to having a rule where you just don't do certain things in certain places. And you mentioned getting enough sleep. The reason to get the phone out of the bedroom is to help people's brains settle down.
Yes.
And so that you don't begin the day with a blast of input from the outside world. So one of my practices is first thing in the morning, I do not lift my phone. I have a good old fashioned alarm clock.
They still exist, everyone.
They do. And if Alexa lives at your house, or Google Assistant, or any one of those, you can have that machine wake you up, so that your first gesture is not to immediately dive in there. At least reserve a few minutes, like go to the bathroom, have a cup of tea, meditate, stretch. Yes. Connect with the other people that you live with, or connect with yourself, and wait until you're ready to invite stimulus from the outside world in. And then the same at the end of the day. Shut the device down like at least 15 minutes, a half an hour before you go to bed, so that you stop having more outside input, and you can again check in with yourself at the end of the day. And you can model that for kids so that they just get used to that's the rule. Another thing, do family activities without media involvement. So go for walks with no one on their phone. Go, hiking or camping, and have at least part of that time where the devices are away, so they learn how to be in a place without always being online.
Yes.
And then, look up and notice the world around you. And that's where mindfulness can come in. I have a dog, and I'm sure many of your listeners have dogs or other pets, and animals are wonderful for helping to bring you in the present, because that's where they are all the time. So like when I take my dog for a walk, I have a commitment to not checking my phone.
That's great.
So I can walk and be with him. So these are some examples.
Those are great. The one thing that you said that it hit me, that you said, actually be with the people that are in your house or be with yourself. And it's like, we wake up and we're immediately inviting all these other people into our world.
That's right.
And it's like, you are choosing to be with this person that you're with that's living in your house, and your kids. And it's like, be with them first. Those are the ones that really matter, instead of reaching for a device.
Right. Because, so you have little ones. One day, they'll grow up and go off, and I guarantee you won't say, oh, I wish I'd spent more time on my phone before they grew up.
No, it happens so quick. And I've already noticed in them that it's like with my son, he will look at me, and, if I'm trying to sit there and work and return messages or do something on my phone, he will get my phone now and actually take it from me, and he puts it down. And I'm like, okay, that's your cue. Like,
wow,
get off. Because he knows, like, he's like, hey, I need your attention. And he's nonverbal. And so, like, that's his verbal cue to me of saying, like, hey, I need something. And that always hits me really hard, because I'm like, okay, get off. He's trying to communicate with you. And
that's beautiful.
It is. But it can make me feel really sad, but it also makes me really happy. All these mixed emotions at one, but it's like it makes me sad because I'm like, pay attention. We need to pay
Mhm.
attention as parents, as moms, and say, okay, this is what they need from us. And if we're constantly just looking down or not making that eye contact with them, how are we supposed to actually know what they're craving, what they
They
need,
need.
what they want? And that goes for our own
Absolutely.
relationships with
Oh yes.
like
Right, with our partners, with our friends. You
yes.
know, if you get together with your girlfriends and everybody's on their phones, what's the point?
That me and you both threw our hands up at the same time. Why are we even wasting our time here?
Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, the way I like to say it, because it's a sort of fun little rhyming thing, you know, we need to become intentional with our attention. Where are you putting your attention? It's it's now the most valuable commodity in our economy. Everybody's trying to get our attention. Look at me, buy this, vote for me, right? Like there's a nonstop onslaught of cognitive stimulus coming at us 24/7. One of the few things we have some choice over internally is where are you putting your attention? Like right now, I'm focusing on you. In order to do that, I'm ignoring and blocking stimulus from the rest of the world so I can be present with you. And that's how important things happen when people pay attention. You can't get anything important done if you're not paying attention,
Ugh, I love
including
that.
raising children.
Oh, yes, truth there all the way. So where can my listeners get in contact with you? Where can they find out more about Carrots and Cake?
Okay, great. So I'm happy to say that your listeners can get 60 days free. You can get a free download of Carrots and Cake. So if you go to carrotsandcake.com, carrots and cake all, you know, smushed together, one word,
Yes.
carrotsandcake.com. And they should use the special discount code MOBB,
Okay.
right?
Awesome.
For mob
Yeah.
mentality. And there will be, you know, instructions about the download and how to get it set up. And if you have any questions, you know, there'll be a way to contact them if you have more questions. And then if people want to find me, I'm at Gwenyth Jackaway, PhD.com. So my whole name and then the letters PhD, since I have one of those.
You worked hard for one of those.
Yeah, long time ago. So, and that's especially for people in the New York area, in terms of the digital wellness workshops that I offer. And I'm happy to talk to parents if they want some more guidance.
That is great. Thank you so much. Can't wait to check out Carrots and Cake, get connected with you even further. I know this is going to be super useful and valuable to so many parents out there, moms. I hope dads are listening to this too, because we all need it. Thank you so much for
Indeed.
joining us today. And everything will be posted in the description to be able to get in touch with Gwenyth and then also to get in touch with Carrots and Cake. Get your free trial. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sasha.